I've been a cemetery groundskeeper for 23 years. Oakwood Memorial Gardens, Tennessee. December 23rd, 2018. 2 days before Christmas. The kind of day where the cold gets into your bones and stays there. We got the call at 6 a.m. Emergency exhumation. Section D, Plot 247. The drainage system had failed after 3 days of heavy rain. Water was pooling, threatening 6 graves. The cemetery board wanted the coffins moved before the ground became completely unstable. Legal liability, property damage, the usual concerns. My crew was 4 men that day. Me, supervisor, lead groundskeeper. Tommy Riggs, 31, been with us 7 years. Darius Webb, 45, former construction worker. And old Hank Pruitt, 72, been digging graves since 1970. Hank had seen everything. Coffins that had collapsed, vaults that had shifted, ground that had opened up and swallowed whole sections during floods. "Nothing surprises me anymore," he'd say. "The earth does what it wants." We loaded the equipment at 7 a.m. Backhoe, shovels, pumps for the water, heavy canvas straps for lifting coffins. It was cold, 28 degrees, but at least it wasn't raining anymore. The ground was soft, though, saturated. Each step left a deep print in the mud. Section D was the oldest part of Oakwood. Burials dating back to 1923. Plots with names nobody remembered anymore. Headstones weathered smooth. The kind of place where you felt the weight of time. The quiet accumulation of decades. Plot 247 belonged to Mrs. Vera Hollis. Died December 19th, 1954. 64 years ago, almost to the day. Her headstone was simple granite. Beloved wife and mother, forever in our hearts. No flowers, no recent visitors, just the stone and the flooded ground around it. "Let's get the pumps running first," I said. "Clear as much water as we can before we dig." We set up the portable pumps. They coughed to life, pulling water out of the saturated earth. It would take maybe an hour to lower the water table enough to work safely. While we waited, Hank walked the perimeter. Old habit, checking the adjacent plots, making sure the ground was stable. He stopped at plot 248. Mrs. Hollis's husband, Peter Hollis, died March 19th, 1978. "They're together now anyway," Hank said quietly. "Just in different holes." At 8:30 a.m., we started digging. Tommy operated the backhoe. Slow, careful scoops. You can't just rip into the ground with these old burials. The coffins are fragile. Wood that's been underground for decades becomes soft, porous. One wrong move and you collapse the whole thing. Darius and I worked with shovels, clearing the edges, exposing the vault walls. Most graves from that era had concrete vaults, boxes that held the coffin, protection from the elements, from the weight of earth. Hank supervised, standing at the edge of the excavation, watching our progress, making sure we maintained the proper depth ratios. We were maybe 3 feet down when I first heard it. Faint, distant, like wind through metal chimes. A soft jingling. I stopped digging, lifted my head. "You guys hear that?" Tommy shut off the backhoe. The engine coughed into silence. We stood there in the muddy hole, listening. There it was again. Jingling, rhythmic, like small bells, the kind you'd hear on a Christmas decoration, on a wreath or a sleigh ornament. Someone's walking through the cemetery, Darius said. Probably got bells on their dog's collar. I climbed out of the excavation, looked around. Section D stretched in all directions. Rows of headstones, leafless trees, gray sky. No movement, no people, no dogs. The cemetery was closed, gates locked at dawn for the emergency work. Nobody should be here except us. "Cemetery's empty," I called down. "Must be coming from outside the fence." We went back to work. Tommy started the backhoe again. The diesel engine roared, but even over the noise, I could hear it. That jingling. Clearer now, closer. At 4 feet down, Tommy stopped again. I hear it. That's not coming from outside. We all stopped, the backhoe silent, our shovels still. The only sound was our breathing, the drip of water from the pumps, and that jingling. Soft, rhythmic, musical almost, coming from below us, from the excavation. "That's impossible," Darius said, but his voice was thin. Hank moved to the edge, looked down into the hole. His face was unreadable. "Keep digging." "Hank, there's something." "I know what I hear, and I've heard it before. Keep digging, don't stop until you reach the vault." We dug. 5 feet, 6 feet. The jingling got louder, not dramatically, not like approaching footsteps, just present. Persistent, like it was seeping up through the earth itself. At 7 feet, we hit the concrete vault, standard burial depth. The vault lid was cracked, water damage probably, pressure from the saturated ground. We'd need to lift it carefully. The jingling was clear now, unmistakable, like a dozen tiny bells, gentle, almost cheerful, the sound you'd hear in a store during Christmas, on a decoration, on a door. But it was coming from inside the vault. Tommy's hands were shaking. "I'm not opening that." "It's just sound," I said, trying to convince myself as much as him. "Could be air pockets, metal deteriorating, water moving through the coffin." "That's not water." Darius was backing away from the excavation. "That's bells, Christmas bells, and it's coming from a coffin that's been underground for 64 years. Hank climbed down into the hole, 72 years old, and he moved like a man half his age. He placed his hand flat on the vault lid. "I can feel it," he said quietly. "Vibration, like something moving." "We should call someone," Tommy said. "Police, the cemetery board, someone." "And tell them what?" Hank looked up at us. "That we hear Christmas bells in a grave? They'll think we're insane." He was right, and we had a job to do. The ground was unstable, the coffin needed to be moved, emergency exhumation, legal authorization, everything by the book. "Help me lift this lid," Hank said. I climbed down. Darius reluctantly followed. Tommy stayed above with the backhoe straps. We positioned ourselves around the vault, got leverage under the concrete lid. The jingling continued, steady, rhythmic, right beneath our hands. "On 3, Hank said. 1, 2, 3. We lifted. The concrete lid was heavy, maybe 400 pounds. We raised it slowly, carefully, shifted it to the side of the excavation. The coffin was exposed. Dark wood, badly deteriorated, water stains. The brass handles were corroded green. The nameplate was still legible. Vera Hollis, 1890 to 1954. And the jingling stopped. Just like that, mid-sound, like someone had flipped the switch. Complete silence. We stood there, 4 grown men in a muddy grave, staring at a coffin, listening to nothing. "Open it," Hank said. "Are you insane?" Darius's voice cracked. "We heard." "Open it. I need to see." This wasn't protocol. Exhumations didn't include opening coffins unless legally required, but Hank was already prying at the lid. The wood was soft, waterlogged. It came away in chunks. Inside was exactly what you'd expect. Remains, bone and fabric, the silk lining of the coffin stained brown with age and moisture, personal effects, a ring, probably a wedding band, glasses, the metal frames long corroded. No bells, no decorations, no metal objects that could jingle, nothing that could make sound. Just death. Just the quiet aftermath of 64 years underground. We completed the exhumation, moved Mrs. Hollis to temporary storage while the drainage was repaired, moved 5 other coffins that day. No more sounds, no more jingling, just the normal work of disturbing the dead. But none of us talked during the rest of the shift. We worked in silence, loaded equipment in silence, drove home in silence. That night, I looked up Vera Hollis, cemetery records, obituary archives. The library had old newspapers on microfiche. She died December 19th, 1954. Heart attack. Sudden. Unexpected. She'd been decorating for Christmas. Her family found her in the living room, surrounded by ornaments and garland. A box of silver bells scattered on the floor around her. Her funeral was December 22nd. The obituary mentioned that her grandchildren insisted on placing Christmas decorations in her coffin. She loved the holidays, her daughter was quoted saying. We couldn't let her go without them. But when we opened that coffin, when Hank pried away the deteriorated wood, there was nothing. No decorations. No bells. Whatever had been buried with her had long since decomposed or corroded away. Yet we heard them, all 4 of us, for 20 minutes, getting louder as we got closer, crystal clear, unmistakable, Christmas bells, ringing underground. The next day, I went back to Oakwood, alone, walked through Section D, stood at Plot 247. The excavation was filled now, fresh dirt, temporary marker. Mrs. Hollis would be reburied once the drainage was fixed. I stood there for a long time, listening. The wind through the trees, cars on the distant highway, birds. Nothing else. But I remembered what Hank had said as we were packing up. We asked him if he'd ever heard anything like that before. He'd nodded slowly. Twice. Once in '89, once in '03. Both times right before Christmas. Both times old graves. Both times the deceased had died during the holidays. "What do you think it means?" Tommy had asked. Hank had looked at the excavation, at the disturbed earth, at the place where we'd heard impossible sounds. He'd said, "I think the earth remembers."
The ground holds things, not just bodies, moments, feelings, important things. And sometimes, when conditions are right, when the season matches, when someone disturbs the rest, it releases them. Little echoes, little reminders. Reminders of what? That the dead aren't just gone. They're held, kept, and some part of them, some small part, stays aware, stays present, stays connected to what mattered to them. I still work at Oakwood, still supervise exhumations, still dig graves and move coffins and maintain the grounds. But I've started paying attention to dates, to seasons, to what time of year someone died versus when we're moving them. And I've noticed something. That December, we had 3 more exhumations. All emergency work, all old graves, all flood damage. And my crew, the same 4 men, we worked them, but we made a rule, unspoken but absolute. We start at dawn. We finish before sunset. We don't work after dark. Not in December. Not during the holidays. Because if the earth remembers, if the ground holds echoes of the season, then I don't want to know what else might rise up when the sun goes down and the world goes quiet. The bells were gentle, musical, almost joyful. But what if that's not the only thing the earth remembers? What if Christmas bells are just the beginning? Hank retired 3 months later, sold his house, moved to Florida. I asked him why. He said, "I'm 72. I've dug graves for 48 years. I've heard things I can't explain, seen things I don't want to remember, and I've learned one thing." What's that? The dead don't mind being moved. They don't mind the rain or the shifting earth or the passage of time, but they mind being forgotten. They mind when the season comes and goes and nobody remembers what mattered to them. He looked at me. His eyes were tired but clear. Vera Hollis loved Christmas, and 64 years later, we heard her bells. We remembered her, even if we didn't know we were doing it. You think she wanted us to hear them? I think she wanted someone to know she's still there, still holding on to what she loved, still present. The jingling was real. All 4 of us heard it. All 4 of us will swear to it. And sometimes, late at night during December, I think about those silver bells, the ones that scattered on the floor when she died, the ones her grandchildren placed in her coffin, the ones that were gone when we opened it. But the sound remained. The earth remembers, and some echoes never fade.
I've been a cemetery excavation specialist for 16 years. Riverside Memorial Park, Pennsylvania, Christmas morning, 2014. The kind of morning where the world is white and silent and everything feels suspended. We got the court order on Christmas Eve, legal exhumation. criminal investigation. The DA's office needed evidence from a burial that had taken place 11 months prior, March 2014, suspected foul play. The family had finally pushed hard enough for an investigation. We had 72 hours to complete the work and preserve the remains for forensic examination. Christmas Day work pays triple time, but nobody wants it. It feels wrong. Disturbing the dead on Christmas morning while families are opening presents and drinking coffee and pretending the world is good. But the court order was clear. Begin December 25th at dawn. Complete by December 27th. My partner was Luis Ochoa, 43, former Marine, 15 years with the county medical examiner's office. He'd seen combat. He'd processed mass graves in Iraq. Nothing rattled him. It's just a job, he'd say. The dead don't care what day it is. We loaded the truck at 5 a.m. Still dark. The forecast said snow had fallen overnight, 4 inches, temperatures in the low 20s. The roads were empty. Everyone was home. Everyone except us. Riverside Memorial opened the gates at 5:30 a.m. The caretaker, Mr. Walsh, met us at the entrance. 70 years old, been working there since 1980. He looked tired, unhappy. Section G, Plot 89, he said, handed me the documentation. Cameron family plot. You'll want to be careful. Ground's frozen under that snow. The plot belonged to Ashley Cameron, 7 years old, died March 15th, 2014. The official cause was listed as accidental drowning, pool accident, tragic. But 9 months later, someone had come forward, a witness, questions about the timeline, about who was home, about bruises the coroner had noted but not investigated. Now the state wanted answers. We drove the truck through the cemetery roads. Fresh snow covered everything, untouched, perfect. The headstones looked like they were wearing white caps. The trees were heavy with it, beautiful if you forgot why we were there. Section G was in the back, newer burials. The stones were modern, polished granite, photos etched into the markers. Ashley Cameron's grave was easy to find. Pink granite, heart-shaped. Her photo showed a gap-toothed smile, pigtails, birthday cake in front of her. Forever our angel, taken too soon. Luis parked the truck 30 feet away. We unloaded the equipment, backhoe, tarps, evidence containers, camera for documentation. That's when I saw them, footprints in the snow.
Small prints, child-sized, maybe a size 12 shoe. They circled the grave, around and around, multiple rings, some overlapping. Like someone, like a child, had walked around Ashley's plot over and over during the night. I stopped, stared. "Louis, look at this." He came over, looked down at the snow. The prints were clear, distinct. You could see the tread pattern, small sneakers, kids' shoes. "Someone was here last night," he said. "The cemetery was locked. Walsh said they closed at 4 p.m. yesterday, locked the gates." Louis walked the perimeter, studying the snow. "There's no trail leading here, no prints coming from the road, no prints from the fence." He was right. The prints just started, right at the grave, circled it, and stopped. No trail in, no trail out. Just rings around Ashley Cameron's plot, around and around.
Kids probably hopped a fence, Lewis said. But his voice wasn't confident. Came to visit, left a different way. On Christmas Eve? In the snow? In the dark? He didn't answer. I pulled out my phone, called Walsh. The Cameron plot. Was anyone given access yesterday? Family visit? No, Walsh sounded certain. The cemetery was closed all day Christmas Eve. No visitors logged, no cars in the lot. There are prints here, child-sized, circling the grave. Silence on the line. Then, that's impossible. I did my final walk at 3:45 p.m. That grave was clear. No prints, no disturbance. The snow had stopped falling around 2 a.m. according to the weather report. That meant whoever made these prints had been here between 2 a.m. and 5:30 a.m. in a locked cemetery on Christmas morning. We should call the police, I said. Lewis shook his head. And tell them what? That we found prints? They'll say the same thing. Kids hopping fences. We have a court order. Clock's running. Let's document and work. He was right about the timeline. We photographed everything. The prints, the angles, the lack of approach or departure trails. Then we started setting up the excavation equipment. Lewis operated the backhoe. I marked the dig site. Standard procedure. We'd remove the snow, then the sod, then begin the careful excavation. As we worked, I kept looking at those prints, the rings around the grave. There had to be 15, maybe 20 circles, overlapping, obsessive, like someone walking in grief, or searching, or waiting. At 7:30 a.m., the sun was fully up, gray light, overcast. The temperature was still 22 degrees, freezing. Nothing was melting. But the prints were melting. I noticed it when I went back to the truck for evidence bags. The outer ring of prints, the ones farthest from the grave, were fading. Not melting in the normal way where snow turns to slush, just disappearing. The tread marks becoming less distinct, the depth becoming shallower. Lewis, the prints are fading. He stopped the backhoe, looked. That's not possible. It's 22 degrees. Snow doesn't melt at 22 degrees. But it was happening. As we watched, another ring vanished. Just smoothed out, like someone was erasing it from underneath. We worked faster, got the excavation started. 1 foot down, 2 feet down, the backhoe moving carefully. The ground was frozen but workable. At 3 feet, another ring of prints disappeared. At 4 feet, another ring gone. By the time we reached the concrete vault at 6 feet, only 3 rings remained, the ones closest to the grave, the ones that circled tightest, the ones that suggested someone standing right at the edge, looking down. Lewis shut off the backhoe. We climbed into the excavation, started clearing the coffin lid by hand, brushes and small tools. You have to be careful with forensic exhumations. Everything is evidence. The last 3 rings of prints were still visible above us. I could see them from the bottom of the grave. Small shoes, walking in circles, around and around, like a child who couldn't leave. We lifted the vault lid, exposed the coffin. Small, white, child-sized. And above us, the final ring of prints melted away, just vanished. Even though the temperature was still freezing, even though nothing else was melting, just those prints, just that evidence that someone, something, had been walking circles around this grave all night. Did you see that? My voice was barely a whisper.
Louis was staring up at the snow-covered ground above us, at the place where the prince had been. His face was pale. I saw it. We completed the excavation, opened the coffin. Ashley Cameron was there, exactly as she'd been buried. Small body in white dress, hands folded, peaceful. But the forensic examination would later show what the original coroner had missed. Injuries consistent with assault, timeline inconsistencies, evidence of prolonged submersion, not an accident, not quick.
The stepfather was arrested 3 weeks later, charged, eventually convicted. Ashley hadn't drowned by accident. She'd been held under for minutes while she fought. We finished the work by noon, resealed the vault, filled the excavation, restored the site. The snow was still falling lightly, covering our work, covering the ground where those footprints had been. Louise and I didn't talk much on the drive back. What was there to say? We'd both seen it. The footprints, with no approach, no departure. The impossible melting in freezing temperatures. The way they'd vanished ring by ring as we dug deeper, as we got closer to the truth. That evening I went home, tried to enjoy Christmas with my family, but I kept thinking about those prints, about a child walking in circles, around and around her own grave, on Christmas morning, in the dark. The next day I called Walsh, asked him if there had been any disturbances at the Cameron plot before, any vandalism, any strange occurrences. "Funny you should ask," he said. "The groundskeepers have mentioned something. Since the burial in March, they sometimes find the flowers rearranged, stuffed animals moved, always in circles around the stone. They figured it was the mother, coming at night. Grief does strange things. Have they ever seen her?" "No, cemetery's locked at night. We have cameras at the entrance, but not in the sections. Too expensive. But the next morning, sometimes things are different, rearranged. In circles." "Yeah, in circles." I thanked him, hung up. I've done 63 exhumations in my career. Routine relocations, legal investigations, archaeological surveys. I've opened graves from the 1800s. I've processed modern burials. I've seen coffins that collapsed, bodies that mummified, remains that were nothing but dust. But I've never seen footprints appear from nowhere, circle a grave, and vanish as we uncovered the truth. Luis won't talk about it, says it was a trick of the light, ice formation, something rational. He needs it to be rational. But I was there. I saw them. I photographed them, though the photos show less than what we witnessed. The depth, the clarity, the way they disappeared. And I keep thinking about what Walsh said. Things rearranged, in circles, since March. Ashley Cameron died in March, was buried in a white coffin, with stuffed animals and flowers, while her stepfather told police it was an accident, while her mother believed him, while the system moved on. But she didn't move on. For 9 months, something circled that grave, rearranged the flowers, moved the toys, waited. And on Christmas morning, when we finally came to uncover the truth, she was there,
walking circles, watching, making sure we saw, making sure we knew. The footprints had no trail in because she was already there, already waiting, already watching over her own grave. And they had no trail out because she never left, not until we opened that coffin, not until we took her to the forensic lab, not until the investigation finally began. Then the footprints melted, vanished, released, because she didn't need to wait anymore. I still do exhumations, still respond to court orders, still dig up the dead when the law requires it. But I pay attention now to the ground around graves, to disturbances in snow or dirt or grass, to patterns that repeat, because sometimes the dead don't rest. Sometimes they can't. Sometimes they keep walking, keep circling, keep waiting, until someone finally listens, until someone finally looks, until someone finally sees the truth they've been circling all along. Ashley Cameron was 7 years old. She loved pink. She loved stuffed animals. She loved Christmas. And on Christmas morning 2014, she made sure we found what had been hidden. The footprints were small, child-sized, walking in circles, around and around and around, waiting for someone to dig deep enough to find the truth. And when we did, when we finally opened that coffin and started the investigation, she let go. The footprints melted. She stopped walking. She could finally rest. But I'll never forget the feeling of being watched that morning, standing in that excavation, looking up at those disappearing footprints, knowing that something small and patient and determined had been walking circles in the dark, knowing that the dead don't always stay silent. Sometimes they walk, sometimes they wait, sometimes they make sure we see exactly what they need us to see, even if it means leaving footprints in the snow. On Christmas morning, in a locked cemetery, with no way in and no way out, just circles, around and around and around.